Is trigeminal neuralgia really just a neuropathic nerve injury condition? Or is there more to the story? Many people with trigeminal neuralgia experience fibromyalgia-like symptoms: widespread pain, fatigue, insomnia, and brain fog, features of what we call nociplastic chronic pain. What is it actually like to live with trigeminal neuralgia? Today we're talking with a true warrior who lives with trigeminal neuralgia every day. Her story will help you understand the full picture and why trigeminal neuralgia is far more complex than most people realize.
There's nothing like suiting up, putting on your goggles, hearing those bikes rev up, the wind in your face. I don't quit despite the pain. I still continue to race, and I can use my platform to shine a light on others because they deserve to be heard too. It was around Christmas time, my husband bought himself an ATV. I was very upset because it was a large purchase. We had, 3 little ones. We weren't going to buy each other gifts. A few weeks go by, and the kids were telling me, "Oh, Mom, it's so much fun." And, I gave in. And that following week, I had my own bike. Trigeminal neuralgia is a damaged nerve in your face. We don't know why it happens, but it does happen to women over 50 more than any other age or demographic. It's a constant burning, tingling sensation. And to have a really bad flare-up, you can't even get comfortable. Tylenol, oxycodone, those things didn't have any effect on it. To get a diagnosis for me was right around 5 years. Finally, they sent me to a specialist, and he said, "I think you have trigeminal neuralgia." I go straight to my car, and I'm Googling it, and it says suicide disease. And I was like, I'm gonna die. But in the same breath, I felt like now I know what I'm fighting. When I was diagnosed, I knew that I would not stop racing because I had already raced with it and I knew I could handle it. Racing was going to be part of my life as well as trigeminal neuralgia, so they just had to get along. A lot of people that I race with were not aware that I had trigeminal neuralgia. Never heard of it before. So I started talking about it a lot more, and people were really receptive to what I was saying. When I was going through my first few months of being diagnosed, I didn't have anybody. So I started Teen Warrior Racing to make a positive difference. I just want to be able to guide someone so they're not spending a whole bunch of time in pain with no resources. When people see that, they come up and they ask questions. That's key, is just spreading that word so people know, hey, this pain that I'm having could possibly be what Marsha has. Let me reach out to her. It's really heartwarming to know that the work that I'm doing is being paid attention to. Right now, my trigeminal neuralgia is under control. I still have to fight through the flare-ups, but the race community, they support me like no other. Do you need anything? How are you feeling? That's unmatched by anything that I go through on my day-to-day. Regardless of the pain that you're suffering with, you shouldn't give up on what you love. That gives you things to look at when you are in your painful days. We just got to keep fighting. God picks his strongest to do his biggest battle, so I guess that's why I'm here.
Marsha, so nice to have you here. Many people listening and watching this video may not know you, but those who do know you as a strong advocate for trigeminal neuralgia and other related chronic pain syndromes. But they don't know the story behind it. Can you take us back to the beginning and how you got the early stages of the struggles you've had.
Yes. I I started off, racing, many years ago. I've been racing for close to 20 years. And maybe about 5 years into it, I started getting this really bad achy pain in the back of my neck and back of my head, and I just thought it was from racing hard. And one time I had done a race, and it was probably about an hour race, and that's going, full speed. And I was driving home, I was by myself, and I had to pull over. The pain was just unimaginable. I pulled over and I knew something was wrong. This was not a headache. It wasn't sinus. I hadn't hit my head or anything. It was just excruciating. I could not figure it out. So I sat on the side of the road for probably about 25 minutes. It was getting dark, so I knew that I needed to get off the road and get home. And I wasn't very far from home. I was maybe an hour and a half from home. So when I got home, I didn't unpack anything. I just went straight to bed. And I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't get in any position. So I put heat on the back of my head and it seemed to calm it down. Well, one day I was at work and I went to scratch the top of my head. And all of a sudden, this pain shot through my scalp. And it was so bad that I had to excuse myself from the customer that I was standing in front of. And I went to the restroom and I was sitting down on the restroom floor holding my head because I didn't know what was going on. I honestly thought I was going to have a brain aneurysm or something because it wasn't a headache. It wasn't like anything that I had dealt with before. So after having episodes like this happen over and over again, I got to the point where I couldn't work anymore at the bank. So I stopped working at the bank, moved to Washington State, and the cold weather made it so much worse. I had to move back to Arizona, and I had no idea at this point that I had trigeminal neuralgia. And I loved Washington, but I knew that there's no way I could live there. Came back, had, all my different incidents, going to the emergency room and having CAT scans and MRIs, and then coming up with nothing, to the point that I had been to the emergency room so many times that they thought that I was drug seeking. And I said, nothing helps. So how could I be drug seeking? I just feel like I'm going to die. I feel like these episodes are causing me to not only be in excruciating pain, but I'm also getting depressed. So anxious because, every little twinge or anything going on with me, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to happen. I'm going to have this episode. And I went to my neurologist and he said, there's nothing I can do for you. I'm going to have to send you to a pain specialist. So I was like, okay, whatever they can do. I'm ready to try anything because I felt like giving up. I was really close to the black hole and I knew that something had to happen. And I went to the pain specialist and he said, I think I know what you have, but I'm going to try to do a nerve block to see if that might help a little bit. And so he gave me the shots and that really didn't help. And I went back the next day and he said, I believe you have trigeminal neuralgia. And I went back to my car and I Googled it and I was scared, but at least I knew what I was dealing with. And that gave me the fight. I'm able to fight it. At least I'm not, writhing in pain on the bathroom floor. I know how to deal with it now. I know what I'm dealing with. So that was how I started being an advocate. So I would go to these Facebook pages and read other people's stories. And there was a gentleman on there and he was a military member. And he was talking about how he has to go, he's being deployed and he didn't care if he came home or not because of having to deal with trigeminal neuralgia. And that devastated me. I felt like this man is going to protect our country and he has no diagnosis for this condition that he's going through. I can imagine going to war or to, serve in the military and have to deal with this. It's just unfathomable to me. So that really touched me, and I wish I would have gotten his information so that I could reach out to him, but I wasn't advocating at that point. I was just learning myself, and I had nobody to turn to. I didn't know about the Facial Pain Association or the Facial Pain Research. I didn't know about any of that. None of the doctors told me, hey, reach out to these people. So I was doing it all on my own. And I felt like, what if there are people out there that aren't as strong or as, determined to find a way to cure this? I want to speak for them. And I never stopped racing. That wasn't even a question. It was just, how can I race and be comfortable? And I don't have too many flare-ups while I'm racing. It's when I take my helmet off. That's when the pain starts to kick in and the lightning strikes and all that kind of stuff happens. So that's how I originally got started with.
So, how old were you roughly at the time, and what was the time interval between these early symptoms and that pain specialist giving you the diagnosis?
It was probably about 5 years into racing, and then another 3 years after that is when I finally got a diagnosis.
8 years from your first symptoms. And how many doctor healthcare visits, ER, urgent care, primary care, neurology visits do you think you had before you got that first diagnosis?
I would say at least 25, at least.
Mhm.
To the point where I stopped going because I felt like I wasn't being taken seriously. I felt like they're just trying to get me out of the office. There were so many times where I had an appointment and I would get so excited, oh, they're going to find something this time. And I would leave that office in tears because they told me the same thing the last one told me. Here, take this and I'm going to give you, we're going to up your dose. And it was just so heartbreaking that I said to myself, I'm done. I'm not going to do it anymore. So I started talking to other people, getting what they would do. How do you handle it? What do you do? What do you take? Whether it's holistic or, and I started building kind of like my own book of things that work and things that don't. And then I can't remember how I found the Facial Pain Research Foundation and the FPA. And that gave me like the green light to just go full force and help as many people as I can, because they would look at me and say, how can you race? And it's, incredible. And I'm thinking, well, if they really can see how dedicated I am to racing, maybe they can see how dedicated I am to finding a cure for trigeminal neuralgia, put them together, and it just seemed to work.
So, for those who are maybe never had trigeminal neuralgia, and you've done now a lot of research, and you yourself aren't a doctor, you're a patient with this, but have subsequently researched and probably know now, probably more than all of the doctors you saw up until the pain specialist on this. I'm humbly saying, and I think that most people who are watching this YouTube channel will know more about these overlapping chronic pain syndromes than most doctors, because we don't have a lot of great training on this. Explain what trigeminal neuralgia is, and as best you can when you're trying to explain it to a lay person who is maybe unfamiliar with this.
How I try to describe it is it's an electric shock. And this is for me, but I have had other people have different um, symptoms or side effects. It feels like a lightning strike. It feels like if you were to put a TENS unit on your face, pads on your face, and you walk around with somebody behind you and they just crank it up. Sometimes it might be a twinge or, a little ouch. And then sometimes it's like, what, you just, yeah, I can't describe it any other way than it's excruciating. It is worse than childbirth. I've broken bones. I so many different things. I've had a root canal that went bad and, you know, so I know pain. Uh, this is not pain. This is torture. It's torture. And you just have to learn how to live with it and minimize the pain because if there's no cure, you have to keep living. You just got to figure out a way to live day to day.
And how many years now has it been since that official diagnosis?
It's been about four years.
So living with this for almost 12 years now. From looking at and understanding this from a medical perspective, there are a couple things that go along with it. There's that trigeminal nerve, and there's different branches. And we don't fully understand it, but there potentially is that anatomical. When we talk in the world of fibromyalgia, there is a tissue damage when somebody breaks their bone, and there's pain from that acute injury. And there's neuropathy. And the most common is going to be diabetes, where there's nerve damage. But this, by the or at least origin of what you're describing, is more of a neuropathic. The nerve has some kind of injury, irritation. We're not 100% sure, right, with all of that. And then nociplastic has to do with how the pain processes things. There can be some overlapping chronic pain aspect or nociplastic pain when it becomes into the more chronic form versus the episodic types. It sounds like you have a nerve aspect of an injury, but also a overlapping chronic component to this.
Correct. Mine's idiopathic, so they don't see any pressure on any nerves or anything like that.
I was going to say, so with the evaluation that people go through when you did have these, what was the diagnostic and evaluations and then assessments that you had once you got that diagnosis for that? What were the follow up things that treatment, or I should say, evaluations and then treatment trials that you've had?
So I have Sjogren's syndrome. And,
Hmm.
going through all these different doctors and specialists, you find out things that you have that you didn't even know you have because they're desperately looking for something to say, this is what you have. And I've had concussions. I've had several concussions. We don't
Interesting.
know if that's the cause. Um, so they don't really go into depth with it. Well, for me, they didn't. It was just like you have trigeminal neuralgia. There is no cure. Let's start off with, and then of course the medications. And then you start dealing with the side effects of the medications. And then I've been on it for so long that it's not even working anymore. It's actually doing worse. So the gabapentin just did not work for me. And I'm off of that. And I haven't really had any other diagnosis. They just say, we can't see anything, but we're going to try to treat the chronic pain.
And first line treatment, I understand, is carbamazepine. I'm guessing you
Mhm.
tried that probably
Yes.
before the gabapentin.
Yes, I tried that and it didn't seem to do a whole lot for me. I went to the emergency room so many times and there was one nurse there and she says, try carbamazepine with Benadryl. And I tried that and it did work. It worked, but at the same time, Benadryl is drying. It dries you out, and I have Sjogren's syndrome. So with having gamma knife, which I've had, um, my eyes don't produce tears well, but this one is even worse because I have anesthesia dolorosa. So I'm slowly losing vision in this eye because of the damaged cornea, because of something that was supposed to correct the trigeminal neuralgia. So I'm so weary about trying anything invasive that I would rather just keep, my drop serum and, my sprays and my bombs. I feel more comfortable with that.
You had The gamma knife, yeah. So that's a specific focal radiation, right? To try to, and from investigating this, there sometimes can be surgery, and to do that, they'll try to sometimes they'll do a special MRI to see. You kind of alluded to the fact that they didn't see any major structural injury. I'm guessing they also checked to make sure that you didn't have multiple sclerosis, which if you do have multiple sclerosis, it's like 20 times higher rate of having that. You did not have that by the word idiopathic. It's sometimes we say the doctors are idiots. We don't know what's going on, but idio from Greek, idio means unknown in Greek, and pathic means disease, unknown causes. And so you did get probably evaluated maybe by a neurosurgeon, and they or potentially, and they didn't think you were a candidate based on what they saw.
Correct. They didn't think I was a candidate for, having the actual surgery where they cut behind you. But they did say the gamma knife, and I had the gamma knife, and it was successful for an entire year, almost to the. And
Oh wow!
then I felt this tingling in my tongue, and it started to move its way to the back of my throat and then to the roof of my mouth. And I
Wow!
called, and they said, yeah, this was maybe a side effect of the surgery. And here's some exercises you can do to hopefully, help along the way, but it's got to return and we can go in again. I said, no, thank you. So the entire left side of my face is numb, but I can still feel that needle prickling feel all on the left side of my face.
And I'm learning about this. This is not as common as trigeminal neuralgia or a migraine or tension headache that often people, when they think of trigeminal neuralgia, might think, oh, that's TMJ. That's a separate kind of condition, although they're in the same location. Um, so it sounds like that gamma was to basically try to destroy the nerve or deaden that nerve in a non surgical way, and hoping that they would turn off. And in one way, it was successful because it caused you to have numbness, which you definitely still have. It almost sounds like they gave a metaphorical amputation, and now you have this phantom limb type pain where you end up going, well, the nerve's damaged. We killed the nerve. You shouldn't have these problems, which then makes me look at this does fall, at least under your case. And I'm not your doctor, I'm not giving advice, but generically saying that there is a difference in how the central nervous system may be processing things. If you want to help raise awareness about trigeminal neuralgia and chronic pain, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Your engagement helps us spread the word and support more people. You gave some clues that make me wonder about other factors that could be going on. You said, well, that you did have concussions. Like, it's not uncommon to have maybe one or two concussions, especially, I'm guessing, in your, well, in your current life, you're still racing. But if you're still racing now, you must have been that very active young girl, woman who was, I don't want to be stereotypical, but playing with the boys, doing a lot of active stuff as a kid. You were, is that fair to say? So you had those in your adult life, you were racing. When you were younger in childhood, what were you like as far as activity and
When I was first started racing, um, I felt like I had something to prove. I was the only African American person out there and the only African American woman, and I was older. And I raced so hard, and I would have I would race always with men because I always had people tell me, "If you race with men, you'll get faster, you'll get faster." So I did that. I raced with men, and I always had their wives come up to me saying, "Kick his butt," you know, "Beat him," they're cheering for me and cheering for their husband. So, it was good times, but I raced really hard, and I had a number of bad accidents, and, it's just something I can't let go of. So
so you had those in your adult life, you were racing. When you were younger in childhood, what were you like as far as
I
activity?
was when I was younger, I was very active. I played, sports. I played softball from, maybe 10 all the way up until, high school. I we had motorcycles at home, but I didn't ride them, my brother did. But I was very active. When I was growing up, though, I did have headaches. I did have migraines.
Okay.
But, back at that time, we didn't think anything of it. We didn't think, "Oh, something might be wrong," or "Let me take you to the doctor." It just wasn't like that back in the day. So, now that I
So
look back on it, it could have been something there, but I would have never known. Mm,
did you remember
yes.
having any painful periods compared to your girlfriends or not much?
I was a late bloomer, but I don't recall having any
Okay.
any issues, or I just remember having headaches on so many occasions that, my mom stopped giving me baby aspirin and started giving me regular aspirin,
Sure.
because it was so but nothing like, "Let's go to a neurologist," or anything like that, so
People maybe didn't always go to doctors unless you
yeah.
were, your arm was chopped off and, you were really sick.
Yeah,
And a lot of
but we didn't go to the doctor for that. You had to be bleeding or, need stitches or something major had to happen.
well, that's interesting. A lot of people who I see often when they get their diagnosis of a chronic pain, it seems like it happens then is the event that happens. But often when you dive into the history, there often are things that were a chronic pain, a migraine, tension, headaches, are with that. And the fact that you said you have a concussion, like somebody might have a concussion and they fell once, they get a headache. The fact that you remember that makes me wonder if these were more of a deeper impact on you than just a felt dizzy for a little bit and a couple days later you were back to normal.
Yes, I did. When I had I had a really major wreck, and I, broke my wrist, had injured my spleen. I mean, it was my worst crash. Mm. I had a concussion. I knew I did. Um, and it probably took me about a week to recover. And I didn't feel right in the head. I felt sick. I felt, it wasn't your normal concussion. I mean, I know what a concussion is, and this just felt a little bit different. And I did ask my neurologist, could that have been something that caused it? And he told me, yeah, it very well could have. But of course, we will never know. So it's just,
Yeah.
I don't like to look back and say what it could have been because I don't know. I just, to me, I think it's something hormonal.
Why do you say that?
I just because of who it affects so many more women than it does men, and to say that we don't know what it is, what could be causing it, I just feel like it's something hormonal. I've always said that, so I don't.
I just made a trailer for my YouTube channel. And I mention in there, and afterwards, if you want to watch, I can send you a link to it. But it's about the medical mysteries, and that's what this channel is to bring to life those invisible chronic pain illnesses that often are medical mysteries. But we've learned a lot more. I find it intriguing that you brought it up because there's a lot more that we're learning about hormones. We're learning that the perimenopause and menopause period and postmenopause, early and then post menopause period, does have a strong impact on a lot of pain conditions, a lot of other overlapping things. So the fact that you bring this up, where is perimenopause and menopause in this timeline of things for you?
So I was in perimenopause in my 40s, and I'm full blown menopause right now.
And how old are you now?
I'm 55.
Okay, so the timing of this 12 years now, and you're 55, so doing math, that's 43. This overlaps with perimenopause. We didn't talk about perimenopause a lot in the medical community. It was just like, it's just something you get, no big deal. There's a lot more, and actually, on this channel, we talk about it quite a bit, and there are a lot of videos regarding that will be already out, and some, when I'm interviewing you now, have not been released, but there is a strong connection between that. So, what about the perimenopause? Because some people may not have any symptoms, but you connected, so you must have had some symptoms, or I don't want to, or signs of menopause, perimenopause.
I it was mainly my mental health. I felt like, yeah, I'm not feeling like myself. I'm feeling achy. I'm doing this. And went to the doctor, my primary care provider, and she, ran her tests and everything. And she says, yeah, you're perimenopause. And I was like, yeah, I kind of knew that. But, so then from there, it was more like something's going on with my body. I can't explain it, but they're telling me everything's okay until she took the test and said, yes, you're perimenopause. And then it kind of subsided. She didn't give me medication or anything until, maybe 2 years ago. I was in full blown menopause. I was sweating profusely. I was body aches. My head wasn't right. I was foggy brain. So that's why I think it is. And I've been off medication. I've been on medication, but
Are you on medication, hormone therapy, estrogen, you
yes,
talking?
yep, estradiol and
When you got first placed on it 2 years ago, about
yes,
age 53, when you
Mhm.
had been full into menopause, but you never
yes,
were on any therapy, hormone therapy support with perimenopause.
right.
And then you, again, not to get personal, but you had never had a hysterectomy. Is that fair to say?
No, I had ablation.
Okay, so you didn't have the classic know when your last period was per se.
Right,
So you had to go by symptoms, and then
right.
was that confirmed when you were
Yes.
going through t-shirts a day and sweating and
Yep.
having to claim, you're like, okay,
Carrying the fan around and all that.
steam coming from your head and the
Yeah.
air conditioner's on. And they're cooking.
Yes,
They're not just cooking eggs on the sidewalks in Phoenix, Arizona.
exactly.
They're cooking them on your head.
Exactly.
They're like, okay, now
Lit-
you meet the criteria. It's like the
Yeah,
the Navy SEALs.
yeah, it is a combination from hell. I tell you, it is a combination from hell to have menopause and trigeminal neuralgia together because
Okay.
you're flaring in the face and you're on fire. It's bad. It's a
So
bad thing.
you shared some insight that a lot of people who have trigeminal neuralgia are women compared to men. Do you know what the rough ratio is, or the of?
I do not know the rough ratio. I just read where the demographic is usually women 15 over. And a lot of times it's a lot of elderly women that have had it for a while and just never did anything about it. They just dealt with it.
Now, you said something that a lot of people say when they are giving a history. Well, I had that, I was fatigued and, achy and all, and I'm like, what? No, I don't know. And a lot of people want to minimize things because they don't want to hear how bad it was. But when you were 43 and you had that visit and they did testing, they said, well, you haven't gone through menopause, which is basically what she checked. She probably did an FSH, a follicle stimulating hormone. They said, well, you haven't gone through menopause yet, so we can't do anything. Often they might have said, well, we can't do anything yet, but I'm going to acknowledge that you probably have some mood dysregulation and you can tell, and your periods may be changing some. But at that point in time, most doctors would have been very timid about doing any what now we call hormonal support. But you had achiness. Can you talk about that? I think you said I was sore or achy.
Just achy in the joints. And I'm very, I'm busy all the time. I'm very active. I'm a very outdoorsy person. And it got to the point where my joints and everything just seemed to ache. Um, and I would tell my doctor this, and they put me on, oh, what's it called? They put me on a antidepressant. I got an antidepressant, something to help with depression, anxiety, and yeah, that worked. But the trigeminal neuralgia was still there, and the pain was still there, but it did help some.
And you say it worked, but it wasn't followed by it worked incredibly well.
No, it didn't work incredibly well. I think it was
It's
Lexapro. It didn't work incredibly well. Nothing worked incredibly well except
nothing
the
was
Gamma knife. That worked for a year and then came back with a vengeance.
yeah. And then you were on estrogen 2 years ago, and you said,
Mhm.
"Well, I'm on and off." Why are you on and off of?
It's not that I'm on and off it. It's like we're trying to find the right combination because I will try that and then we try the patch and then off of the patch and everything seems to be doing okay and then the symptoms come back even worse. At one point it was like, okay, maybe one or two hot flares a week to 2 to 3 daily. And then it messes with your sleep. You can't sleep at night. You're tossing and turning. So then you're sleeping during the day and up at night. So it just kind of threw everything off.
So was there any benefit to estrogen that you've noticed with anything from simple hot flashes or any benefit at all?
Yes, but very little.
So what about racing? Are you still competing?
I am still competing. I actually just registered last night to do the Mint 400, which is a 400-mile race. But I'll be doing it with a team of ladies, and I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, the racing is therapeutic for me because dealing with pain every single day, when I know I have a race coming up, it gets my mind off of the pain. Okay, you got something you got to do. You got to get your bike ready. You got to register. You have to make sure you have your tear offs for your goggles. Where are you going to stay at? It just gives me that motivation to get out there and do it. And then I can talk to people about it too. And I love doing that. I love talking to people about what it is and having them reach back out to me and saying, hey, you really helped me a lot. I was able to get up off the couch today and, go to the grocery store. And I don't usually do that. So you kind of lit the fire for me. And that makes me feel good because, I'm racing, I'm beating up my body. But it's a message to somebody else to not give up.
Yeah, and you have that competitive spirit. For those of people who are out there living with this, who may not know many people with it, they may be struggling in silence, what would you say to them?
I would say just reach out. Most of us are on social media. Look for somebody who might live in the same state as you or the same town, or a doctor that you can reach out to because there's support groups out there. I lead a support group for the Southwest, and after our meetings, it never fails. Someone will email me and say, "Hey, I can relate to this lady that was on the meeting. Can I have her information?" And I'll hook those two up together. And now it's kind of like that's a little team. They can help each other out. They can talk to each other. Um, that's one of the reasons that I am on social media and I'm out there because I want people to feel as though we are one, not you're here and you have this and you have that. It's all pain, it's all depression, it's all anxiety. What can you say about yourself, your story that may impact the next person?
And it sounds like one of the best ways you found is to race. When you're in the zone of the race day, what happens with the rest of your pain and anxiety and all of those overlapping things?
At the start of my day, I have to plan very carefully what I eat, what I drink. I try not to have coffee, but coffee is a crutch for me. So I'll get up, I'll try to have everything together and try not to stress myself out because stress for me does cause flare ups. So I'll try to get all my stuff together and there's people who come and talk to me, want to talk to me before the race. And I have to kind of seclude myself so that, I don't get any distractions and I'll lay down before my race and I'll start with my pills that I take, the Midol and I do sprays, I do DMSO and colloidal silver. I put a little bit of it in the inside of my mouth. I do my drops. I do everything that I have to do, and then I tape it up. So the KP tape, I have to stretch it here and stretch it under my chin and above my forehead to kind of keep everything super tight. And then I put on my helmet and I'm ready to go. And I do my race. Like I said, I usually don't get any shocking pain. I do have really good shocks on my bike. It absorbs a lot of it. But once I get done with that race, pull my helmet off, it's a wrap. I'm done for the day. I do everything that I can. Take a really hot shower, you just lay down and, do whatever I can to keep it from being full blown. It's going to be there, but it's whether it's going to be a 5 or it's going to be a 25. Honestly, but I keep going back for more. So I get help.
I've done episode on this channel, music as medicine, listening to music, performing music. Now, racing as medicine. I could see as a little Saturday Night Live spoof here of like, all right, ma'am, I'd like you to join the local racing club for women over 50. Yeah, and what are you here for? My doctor told me to sign up for the racing. We had there. I think I might get reported to the state licensing board. Well, but yeah, and we start inspiring to me.
You mean a race? No, when I'm out there and I'm racing, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not thinking about the pain. I'm not thinking about, I'm just not thinking about anything. I'm thinking about catching somebody in front of me or,
I would have to say, just by your long athletic history, that you aren't thinking. It's just your body's in the flow state of racing. If I was out there, I'd be like, all right, let me think. Where am I going? How fast? It's not as hard for you, but for many people, obviously it is. And you obviously have a talent to compete at this level. It's just a gift that you have. And I'm sure there's a lot of pattern recognition. Okay, how am I going to cut here? Where are the angles? I'm guessing all of this is reflexively your computer, your pattern recognition in seeing this before and how to make the move and accelerate. And okay, I'm going to land. How do I brace my body? You just do it, right? And other people who are inexperienced would be like, how the heck do you do it? And you're like, well, I'm not thinking about every move along the way.
Yes. Well, I mean, I have 5 grandkids and I know I have to be there for them. So I don't do any crazy stuff like I used to, but I race and I try not to hurt myself. And when I get off the bike, I feel good. My body feels good. I mean, other than, my facial pain and stuff like that. So it is definitely muscle memory because when I go outside to pick weeds, sometimes I need help getting up off the ground. And it's like, I thought I was in good enough shape, but yard work was kicking my butt, but I can get out there and do an hour race and get off and, body feels great other than my face and no problems. So,
And of all of the things you've done in your life as far as competitive sports over the years, I would just imagine the dopamine thrill of racing does not come close or other things don't come close to what you get in your racing. Playing softball, waiting for it to get hit to you in center field, or even if you're playing shortstop, there's a lot of waiting around happening. I'm guessing there's nothing that probably compares to the adrenaline hit you get with.
Yeah, no, I would say the only bigger adrenaline rush that I have had is skydiving. And, we did a skydiving to bring awareness to, depression, anxiety. And the lead up to jumping out of that plane was like nothing I've ever experienced before. And then once you get out of the plane, it's pretty much over with because you're falling so fast. And then they pull the chute and you're on your way floating down. So, but that was the only thing that I could say is the other biggest adrenaline rush was doing the Vegas to Reno race. And that was 500 and something miles. And it's like a leapfrog. It's a team race. So one lady takes the bike to the next lady. That lady does her, 80 laps. And then the next lady does. So that was really fun because you don't know where you're going. Most races that I do, you're racing around a track and you get to see what the track looks like before it. But these long desert races, you don't know where you're going. You're just following, there's a marker over there. There's a marker over there. So that is exciting because you never know what you're going to get yourself into.
It's not.
Yeah. On top of the fact that there's, 1,000 horsepower trucks coming up behind you. And you got to look out for them too. So it's exciting.
There's trucks racing with motorcycles. You're on a motorcycle, UTV.
I'm on an ATV, but we do race with motorcycles and trophy trucks side by side.
Wow. Okay. You've gotten a chance to know a lot of people who are living with this through social media, Facebook and other things. And have you come across that there is a high percentage of former athletes or dancers or very active people, or at least in their past, who have trigeminal neuralgia?
There are some. I have one friend here that's in Arizona, and she is a long distance runner, and she's in remission right now. And I'm just like, oh, thank God. But she, on the other hand, is so anxious that it's going to come back. And I'm like, just ride the wave. Just don't worry about that and do what you got to do. And she's, doing the best she can, but she's one. Most of the people that I meet, they're just trying to survive. They're not, they're doing their everyday life. I rarely meet like young mothers because I can't imagine having kids and having to stop everything because you can't do anything. But yeah, no, not a whole lot of athletes.
Yeah, you mentioned before, and this YouTube channel and podcast is Conquering Your Fibromyalgia, but I say it's actually not just about fibromyalgia, it's about all these chronic invisible illnesses that often don't respond in a typical way. And it sounds like a lot of people who are having this do probably overlap into this, what we call nociplastic. There's chronic pain more than 3 months, and it's carrying over, even if you have the nerve injury, almost like this phantom limb injury, but it's phantom nerve injury on this TMJ or trigeminal neuralgia for you. Do you have, or do you find, and for yourself and for others, that it's not just the pain, but there's any level of fatigue or sleeping problems or brain fog that many people have with this?
Yes, all of the above. If I have a flare-up, if I have a bad flare-up, it can take me almost 2 days to recover because it's almost like labor. You're being in labor. You're in pain. You're trying to control your breathing. You're just, and when it finally subsides, you're worn out. You're just completely worn out and you just want to sleep. You just want to rest.
And fatigue associated.
Oh yeah, definitely fatigue. Well, not only from having to go through the attacks, it's also the medication. The medication is also making you so tired and sleepy on top of the fact that you're having these flare-ups. And let's throw in there that you also have a life to live. So if you have a family to take care of and you got to grocery shop and you got to pay bills, and it's a lot. It's really a lot. And that's why we call ourselves warriors, because it's a battle. Every single day is a battle.
I call it conquering your fibromyalgia. I had somebody who shared who's a medical doctor, who's not attuned to necessarily chronic pain related issues. And she called it, she was interviewing me and she said, it's conquer your fibromyalgia. And I said, no, it's conquering, because it's an ongoing battle. I do not have chronic pain. Many people who try to advocate are people. I just always felt bad for people who were, the ones who didn't get picked to play in a sport. They weren't the good player. You felt bad. You just wanted to be part of that. And often it's sometimes like being a leper, where you're ostracized and stigmatized on the outside. And from my faith background, trying to support people who deserve more and deserve better, and helping support them. But I am genetically prone to diabetes, as I'd like to say. I'm not diabetic, but I always will be genetically prone to this. And I have to continue to eat a healthy diet and keep active to prevent that from happening. One of the things that I've learned today, and I think some take homes for those are listening, is the history. And you said, I don't want to go back in time and dwell, because we can't go back in time. But one of the messages that we learned is there were these chronic pain things, like the migraines that you had, the post-concussion type syndromes that you were having, and the strong connection with the timing. This is more with women. It's midlife, peri and postmenopausal women who are having this. Your personal experience from yourself is that hormones do play a role, that they have had an impact on you with the timing, and have had that rough. Yet you found, at least I want to not give up, because you're competitive and you're competing when racing, but just that spirit. And you've gotten some life into you by serving others, which is trying to be an advocate and knowing and supporting others.
Yes. I look at it like this. You have trigeminal neuralgia. There is no cure. What are you going to do next? That's all there is to it. Every day you wake up with pain is a day to try to figure out how to live with it. It's just a test. Every day is a test on how you can live with it, how you can your life can coincide with trigeminal neuralgia. It just has to happen. You know, I don't know. I've asked in the past, what is the suicide rate? And I never got a concrete answer on what the suicide rate is for people with trigeminal neuralgia, but I've been close to that black hole. I never had a plan or anything, but I've been close to thinking that this is no kind of life to live. But I was thinking wrong. I was thinking that I could be cured. And when I stopped living like I can be cured and started thinking how I can live with it, it changed my whole perspective. And I felt like a bullet. Like, I want to tell people, don't look for a cure. If you get a cure, great. I'm happy for you. And, let's all rejoice in that. But for the ones who aren't cured or whatever, we got to still live. We got to get along. We got to keep moving in life and keep getting up in the morning, take your shower, brush your teeth. Don't brush your teeth if it hurts, take care of yourself. Journal, write down what's working for you, what's not working for you, what's hurting you, what's not. And then you can go back and look at that and start to put the puzzle pieces together, be your own advocate. I know all doctors aren't just pencil pushers. I realize that. But if you can't find a doctor that isn't on your team and you guys have the same goals, find another doctor. Because I have been through so many doctors who just write your prescription and then you're out of there. But they don't talk to you about, how are you feeling? How's your mental health? What are you thinking? What are your plans? How do you want to handle this? It's very little of that and more of, okay, what can I prescribe you? And when I started seeing that, I stopped going to the doctor less and less and less and less because I was getting the same outcome every single time, and that was just crazy to keep going through that. And I'm not saying that we don't need doctors, but for me, I mean, it was enough.
Do you have any faith background? And if so, how has that helped you through all of this?
Yes, I do have faith background. I've served for my church and, done all those things. I was really strong in it, and then I'll have to say I stopped going. But I have always been the type of person. My growing up background, I was always shunned. I was never the favorite. I was teased a lot. It was
Hmm.
for me, it was hell growing up in high school. Couldn't wait to get out. And so I know what it feels like to be left out. And so as an adult, I always focus on let me put my hand out there so somebody can grab it if they need it. I've always been that type of a person. And since the trigeminal neuralgia's come about, that's been amplified even more because I want to make myself available to somebody who is, you know, up at 11 o'clock at night and they just don't know how they're going to get along the next day. You know, I don't know how many times I've heard, I can't do this anymore. Well, you have to do it. You have to do it. God is not ready for you to go. So you have to do it. Now let's figure out what we can do. If it's that bad, go to the emergency room and ask them for the IV cocktail for trigeminal neuralgia. And then once you start feeling a little bit better, then we'll talk about what's next. But
You said something, high school was not good for you. And what
well,
what about high school?
I was always the dark girl, my skin color. It was always, it wasn't, I don't want to say it was frowned upon. It was just, I wasn't the likable one. I wasn't the pretty one. I was just, you know.
And so thankful for you to share this story because
Mhm.
when you said it could be 11 p.m., there could be somebody likely flipping through YouTube, struggling and hearing
Yes.
this interview and knowing they're not alone, that other people are going through it and be inspired by your words who might be having this, acknowledging this. But one of the things that I've learned that many people who are living with chronic pain are neurodivergent.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of a broad umbrella term for what we now understand as having ADHD or being
Yeah.
autistic or dyscalculic. And when I heard you say about high school, and I was kind of thinking, well, one, was there a racial thing? But all was there something beyond skin color that was that now you teared up a little. What
Yeah.
about that?
It was just such a hard time for me back then, with boys and it was just difficult. And I've come a long way from that. And I just never want someone to be alone. I just never want anybody to feel like they don't have anybody to turn to because I felt that way a lot. I I felt like, you know, I just don't want anybody to have to go through it alone.
You know, we talk about chronic pain and there's adverse childhood events. You've probably heard of that called ACEs, which can come in different flavors. I'm guessing you in had levels of that to some degree in the experience of going through high school that left some deep type. Um, and that can carry over. This is not about blaming somebody going through it, but one of the things I've recognized that a lot of people who I, I kind of look at this as having you may inherit a neurotype that's kind of a genetic predisposition, kind of like my genetically prone to heart disease and diabetes. And I do take a medicine to help prevent a heart attack, a cholesterol medicine, and I do that, and I try to do lifestyle supports as best I can. And again, we're all going to die of something, but it sounds like some of those things are not out of the blue. Like maybe you had some of that neurotype kind of wiring, and you found a good path, and then you throw in some extra hormones in there. But many of my patients who are super competitive, who are athletes, who have chronic pain, have ADHD.
So it's funny that you bring that up because the last time I went to see my psychiatrist, I asked him about it. And it said, the ADHD test that you can take, and it described me to a T, but I've never been treated for it.
Say that again. The doctor, your psychiatrist, did an evaluation and diagnosed you as ADHD or did not diagnose you?
He didn't diagnose me as ADHD. He diagnosed me with anxiety and depression.
Okay. Now, are you saying when you looked on your own at
Yes.
the descriptors of this, you bring that
Yes.
up to the doctor?
I didn't. I have to see him. My next appointment to see him to get a
Studies are showing that up to 70-80% of people who are living with chronic pain syndrome have ADHD.
Mhm.
And the connections that we are finding, and I'm part of APSARD, the American Professional Society of ADHD and Related Disorders. And what we're finding is that ADHD is highly co-occurring. It turns out our more modern understanding of being autistic, which is the average to above average IQ kid who didn't quite fit in high school, was kind of quirky, and interestingly, is really good at pattern recognition, which is great description of what you have to do to be a racer, is you are constantly doing pattern recognition, and yet struggled with this. I had a conversation with somebody today who had really a tough time in life growing up, and meeting him, and a huge part of my practice is neurodivergent. Sadly, most doctors who are caring for adults have never trained or received training on understanding ADHD beyond age 18. Most doctors caring for adults have never been trained to understand the average to above average IQ person who's autistic. And when I asked, and you can go and I'll share these videos with you online afterwards, Dr. Emily Wood, who's runs a clinic in LA called Spectrum Psych. I asked her, I said, why aren't these psychiatrists learning this? I was told that every 7 years, half of what you learn changes. I had a mentor. You can see that on my introduction video that on YouTube I emphasize, and that stuck to me in 1990 when he told me that when I was pre-med. I was in an early acceptance med school program, and I'm like, wow. And his point, of course, was you have to be a lifelong learner. What you learned in 1990, don't rest on your laurels. You're going to have new things. And so that was scary, but also exciting to know that we are going to discover these connections that might help people. My grandpa, for example, died of multiple myeloma. That's a much more treatable condition for cancer than we had 30 years ago. So, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I think in this whole world of chronic pain syndromes is the recognition of neurodivergence in chronic pain. The number one way that people are entering the doctor's office with ADHD is a chronic pain syndrome. Sometimes they're coming in because their son or daughter gets diagnosed, and a very good pediatrician is then pointing to the parents and say, anything sound familiar? And often the parents are like, well, I kind of was like that too. And then they're getting recognized. And then you start to see that pattern in the grandkids or the kids as you start to recognize, and our understanding of that is different over time. But Dr. Emily Wood, I asked her that question. I said, why aren't we still learning? And she said, well, they thought that it was just a childhood thing. And I'm like, yeah, but We're supposed to be lifelong learners. And some people are just lazy. And they've been told, well, no, no, no. She's just got anxiety. It's depression. She's not manic. We'll just call it depression and anxiety. And but that's a whole new thing, because what they have to then is admit, wow, I've misunderstood a whole group of patients and I've misdiagnosed them as just depression and anxiety. Now, here's the cool part. If you have ADHD, guess what happens when your hormones change and your estrogen fluctuates? It makes your ADHD worse. Guess what happens when you have somebody and now their estrogen completely shuts down? Guess what happens? And you described in your perimenopause what we would call fibromyalgia-like symptoms. I'm achy, it's in multiple places in my body, and, I'm run down and I'm tired, and it can vary in intensity with the hormones. We know that PMDD, which is that really moodiness before period, is something that early menopause. Now you said yes, you know that, or you know that because you know it because you experienced it. And so did you know that women with PMDD are much more likely to have ADHD?
Yep. Experienced it.
And so did you know that women with PMDD are much more likely to have ADHD?
I
And
never known.
and so when you now look at what we are learning in research of fibromyalgia, and this is what's neat about what I get to do. I kind of say I live on Grand Central Station, because when you are a doctor who specializes in all of the organ systems in the body, you get to see the whole person. And sometimes you get very compartmentalized. A neurologist isn't thinking about perimenopause, and your OBGYN isn't the chronic pain expert. And so they don't see the connection. And when you look at these connections, they're like, oh, these are connected. So here's a classic study I share about chronic pain or ADHD and pain. They took people who had ADHD and people without. These were adults. And they said, put your hand in a bucket of ice water
Mhm.
and tell us when your hand first starts to hurt. They had a stopwatch, and pull it out when it's unbearable. And it turned out those with ADHD reported pain quicker, and
Mm.
they pulled it out faster. Guess what they did in the second half of the study?
What's that?
They gave them
Oh,
Ritalin, and then they repeated the test 2 hours later, and there was a marked increase in how long it took to report pain and how long they could keep it in there. Guess what happens to the fatigue that many people who live with chronic pain when their ADHD gets treated?
probably went away.
Well, it
Unless
lessens.
lessened.
And getting back to the menopause, now studies are showing that about 20% of women, their fibromyalgia starts with menopause. Now,
Mhm.
life gets complicated, and a lot of women go, well, no, that's when I had that car accident at age 50. And you went through menopause and perimenopause.
Right.
Well, that's when I went through my divorce, and you went
Right.
through
Right.
menopause at the same time. And what the interesting part is, and you alluded to this earlier with doctor just wanting to write a script, is that's what we call the biomedical model.
Mhm.
We're looking at you in one dimension, and we're going to treat with a prescription, which is great. That's why a lot of primary care doctors, I think, end up going to urgent care. They're like, I know the person just wants to know if they have strep throat, and
Yeah.
they don't need to cure them. Can you just look in my ear if it's infected?
Yes. Yeah.
And I just want to know if I have a urinary tract infection, and
Yes.
I'm not going to expect you to cure my chronic issues, right?
Yes. Exactly.
But my favorite group of patients is the people who are living with these chronic pain syndromes, because when somebody's suffered for so long and the depth of suffering, as in the air in calculus, they say the area under the curve is so deep. And my goal with this channel is to give that good evidence-based information to people who deserve this and connect the dots. I assumed 15 years ago, as I was seeing these relationships, that everybody else was doing this. I was in a clinic by myself for about 8 years, and then another clinic with only one other doctor, and you're working. And then that's why I decided to write a book. And and then eventually start a podcast. And now I'm really trying to put this out on YouTube to get this information out there, and these connections are there. But a lot of times, if you're a doctor listening to this, and I have a medical students who work with me and shadow me and learn how to do basic stuff, and if they had residents, my medical student made a comment. They just are learning basic history, taking their first year to get out of the gross anatomy lab and talk to a human being that's alive.
Mhm.
And he said, Dr. Lenz taught me that when you take a history, it's not just the typical acute history is when did you hurt your leg? It's looking beyond. Tell me about what it was like growing up as a kid. And your story is super common because often I hear, well, I had stomach aches as a kid, and then I got headaches. And then I had a little painful periods. I probably was moody for my periods, and they said, stop doing like that. So I'd get really sad and tearful during that time of the month, and I'd hold it together, and my mom would kind of give, right, going through. And then when you got into a situation and functioning better, maybe wasn't as bad. So it doesn't happen out of the blue, but getting that longitudinal history and then connecting that, listening to the patients. Nowadays, I just had a patient of mine who, and I'm not giving medical advice, but she's moderately struggling with her fibro despite having her ADHD treated, despite treating with meds that would help, and she's perimenopausal. Now we know that actually supporting with hormone therapy as estrogen levels are fluctuating, adding hormone therapy, which I did with her, and she emailed me through my chart after a month and a half, and she said, thank you, Dr. Lenz, it's making a difference.
Oh, wow.
There's another study that I have coming out later this month. It'll be out by the time, and it talked about women who were going through perimenopause, and they gave them hormone therapy, and there was a marked reduction in episodes of depression developing. So that message getting out in this black box warning for hormone therapy, hormone replacement therapy was just dropped about 3 weeks ago. And I think the pendulum is switching, though, that when you have a 43-year-old version of yourself, now hopefully more and more doctors might be, well, we can try a little extra estrogen to support that. And, with that risk and look the prevention, there was, I think, just a report I saw that actually it lowers your risk of developing breast cancer instead of when we thought it might have raised your risk. And so, and then you're within 10 years of menopause. Oh, it's actually probably protective for your heart, probably lowers still your risk of breast cancer. Oh, maybe it will help. I have to find this. But hypothetically, if somebody who is getting a dopamine hit from racing, but can't get that sustained forever, what if she ends up getting a doctor who has understanding of neurodivergence and can connect the dot? But the psychiatrists, they don't see the connections with the chronic pain. They just see you as an ancient person. And so nobody has this. And you learn to be a good patient and stop and say, okay, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. But hopefully now you can go, wait a minute, I do have this, and this is a connection. And I'm watching detective shows sometimes. On YouTube, it's like cold case file breaking it open. And then we're like, oh, it's always that little grandma who we did that was so innocent and cute, and then she was fine digging holes in her backyard.
Yeah. This is me.
Those homeless people in.
That's my favorite is the first 48. That's my show right there.
And it keeps you engaged. And then, of course, it's like if we could, but when I just spoke at the International Conference on ADHD, and my topic was unmasking the critical connections between autism and ADHD and chronic pain. And I said, it's great when I can help a grandma who's struggling. But what if we get the 6-year-old grandkid who we're already detecting has that same kind of, quote, personality or neurotype? And now we can help recognize their neurotype. You can call that get diagnosed if somebody's neurodivergent, but recognize that neurotype and then support them. If they have ADHD, treat their ADHD. If they are autistic, help them understand what it is and help so the world around them can help understand and support them in the best way they can so that they don't have to go through that struggle or lessen the struggle. Just like I found out at age 33 that I had inherited something called lipoprotein A. I had a little plaque in my calcium of my artery on a heart scan, which I normally wouldn't recommend at 33, but a little bit. And my dad subsequently went on to have heart disease bypass. His dad had one of the first at the Mayo Clinic to have bypass 3 many years ago. And I'm like, that sucks to find out that you have it. But I was a doctor, and the number one killer of adults is heart attacks. And I'm like, I'm this fit, active guy. But thank you for recognizing this so I can identify this early. And your story is one of these that there were clues, and we don't have time to dive into your academic history, but there were probably some of that and recognizing some of that struggles in high school, social and all of that. I'm sure there were girls with more skin pigmentation in high school who mixed in a little bit easier and maybe didn't take it as hard. So it wasn't, and you're a beautiful woman, but it's hard in high school to navigate socially. Like it's so hard, and hopefully more and more people can cozy up to that person and support them and say, dude, that's not funny.
Yeah,
That's really mean. That's not funny at all.
I agree.
Any last thoughts that you have as we wrap up?
Just don't give up. Tomorrow needs you. We'll get there together.
Thank you again so much for taking your time and sharing your story.
Absolutely.
And if people want to connect with you, how can they do it?
They can go to my website. It's www.tnwarriorracing.com, or they can email me at tnwarriorracing657@yahoo.
All right. Well, you might be getting a lot of emails, but
that's okay. I'm looking at
Thanks again for having us. I think that this is your first YouTube on here, and hopefully you can send some of your racing videos that I can maybe show while we're talking.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for watching and being part of this important conversation. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences. See you in the next video.